Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's tour of Latin America is winding down. He landed on Friday in Brazil, where he'll spend the final leg of his trip. And CCTV's Paulo Cabral is in Sao Paulo with the latest.
Well, this is the first visit of a Japanese Prime Minister to South America in 10 years, the last leg of this trip here in Brazil. And actually, it's very interesting to see that they have very important interests here. It comes 2 weeks after the visit of President Xi to Latin America. The Chinese president came, you remember, for the BRICS meeting in Fortaleza. CCTV had extensive coverage. But Japan and China, they do have some overlapping interests in Brazil. For example, in terms of railways, the two countries, Japan and China, are experts in this, and Brazil has a very ambitious plan for its railways. It's planning a large investment, so both countries want to have business in this area, want to sell their equipment and their expertise in building the railways. Oil is another very important area. You know, Brazil has found some gigantic fields offshore, and they are yet to be fully explored. There's a lot of investment to be made here, and also much interest from the whole world on this energy supply that will come out of Brazil in the next few years. And finally, also we have soybeans. Brazil is an agricultural powerhouse. There's a lot of soybean to be exported and a lot of investment to be made here. Japan actually has invested quite a lot in this in Brazil in the late 1970s, early 80s. It's now reaping the benefits of this, but China is trying to catch up. So we really see kind of a geopolitical, economical dispute taking place now in Latin America and Brazil.
Right, well, Paulo, many interests at stake in Brazil for both China and Japan. Which of the countries has the lead now?
Well, look, I mean, if you look from an economical point of view, then it's certainly China. I mean, China since 2009 is Brazil's main trade partner, while Japan is back in the 6th position. And this has happened over the last 10 years. You know, 10 years ago, barely 10 years ago, China was behind Japan in terms of trade with Brazil. But if you look from a political point of view, then things are a bit different, you know. But Japan has a much more established relationship with Brazil. Japanese immigration to this country has been quite significant. It began 100 years ago, while Chinese are more recent arrivals. You know, we've seen more immigration, Chinese immigration to Brazil only over the last 2 decades. And Brazil and Japan also have some common interests regarding the United Nations. For example, the reform of the United Nations of the Security Council. Actually, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff talked about this after a lunch she had with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
The commemoration of 70 years of the United Nations needs to be a moment to adjust the UN to a new global reality in the 21st century. And within the perspective of the G4, we reiterate the importance for wide UN reforms, which includes the expansion of permanent members to the Security Council.
Well, and getting a seat at the Security Council is a cornerstone of Brazil's foreign policy. So certainly this agreement, the support of Japan goes a long way. But we also have to remember that China and Brazil are now part of the BRICS, of the group of emerging nations, just had their summit here. And this has also brought them much closer in terms of politics. So the game is still going for the hearts and minds here in Brazil.
Lots of factors involved there. Paulo Cabral, good to see you. Thanks as always. Paulo Cabral live in Sao Paulo. And here's some of the highlights from Abe's trip. His first stop in Mexico saw him sign several energy deals with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto. They also agreed on other deals, including tourism and education. 2 agreements were signed in Trinidad and Tobago, one creating a climate change partnership, the other to promote renewable energy and efficiency. Abe's visit to Colombia was the first by a Japanese prime minister in 106 years. He agreed to speed up trade negotiations with his Colombian counterparts. And in Chile, he attended the opening of the first fully Japanese-owned copper mine. He also signed a series of agreements dealing with technology and natural disaster preparedness. His trip wraps up on Monday.